In this video we're going to look at some of the things that you can do to records using actions. Actions are accessed through either right-clicking records in the Browse tab or the Search Results window, or by clicking on the Action menu item at the top of both of those windows. The actions that are available are the same in both, so if we click on the Action menu item at the top, we get a list of actions here. And if we right-click on a record in here, we get a similar list of actions down here. The key difference between actions that you access from the menu item and actions that you access from a right-click are the records that those actions act upon. Within the CRS, there's two ways of selecting records. You can choose to mark records with a tick. So you can go through and put a tick next to all of the records that you're interested in, both from this screen and from any of the search screens or any of the filtered browse screens. And then you can choose one of the actions from the menu, and the action will act upon all of the marked records. The other way of selecting records within CRS is to highlight them using the standard Windows Shift-click and Control-click highlighting. So if we wanted to select the top two records and this record down here, for example, we could single click the top record, we could hold down the control key and click the next record, and while still holding the control key we can go down and click this record down here. And what that gives us is a temporary selection of records rather than a more permanent selection which you would get if you ticked them. So if I click somewhere outside that selection, then that selection will disappear. Whereas if I'd selected them with tick marks, so those records are now in our marked list, I can click anywhere else and those ticks still. So the difference then between the two methods of selection are that the ticks are permanent for this session and the highlights are temporary because they disappear when you click another record. In this demonstration we're just going to be working on highlighted records because it's by far the easiest way to deal with records. Let's select, for example, these two records at the top, and we're going to right click and see what actions we have available to us. And let's just look through this list and then we can perhaps drill down into some of the options in more detail. The first option that we have is to send the highlighted records to an author. And we'll look at that in some detail when we come to do that. We can also send the highlighted records to another group. So this is if you find some records in your specialized register that you know might be of interest to another group. This is a quick way of alerting that other group to that. We can set on an alert on highlighted records, and another of the training videos deals specifically with alerts, so we're not going to go into that one here. And we can merge the highlighted records. So you would use that if you found two records that were that ought to be the same record. You can merge the fields to form one record. This option lets you decide whether a record is published in Central or not, and the next option lets you decide whether a record is contained in your register or not. And again, I'll come back and talk about both of those in a minute. That's a fairly obvious one. Delete the highlighted records would delete those records from your CRS segment. You can link the highlighted records to another record, and I'll talk about that one in some detail in a minute. And you can change the highlighted records subtype. So if you know that you've got a bunch of records that you've got flagged as a default reference, but you know that they're really journal articles, you can change them by selecting them here and clicking Change Highlighted Subtype on the menu item. Let's just go back and look at a couple of these in detail then. So let's look at this Central one here. So this is the way that you would publish or unpublish records from Central. Now before we go any further, let's just clarify what we mean by publish and unpublish in Central. Central is published by Wiley on a fixed schedule, and that schedule is likely to be monthly. When you flag something as published in Central in CRS, it's not immediately published in Central on the Wiley site, in the library. What you're doing when you flag something as published in Central in CRS is to say that record is to be published at the next publication run. So it's exactly the same as if you had flagged it for submission to Wiley under the old system. The difference is that you don't have to do anything. All you have to do to make sure that your records appear in Central is to make sure that they have one of these C flags next to them in this first column. So if we wanted to unpublish a record from Central because we'd found that it was wrong or it shouldn't be there, it was the wrong record type, we could simply highlight, let's say we're going to unpublish these two, we could simply highlight those two records, go to unpublish highlighted records, it asks if we're really sure, and we say yes, and those two records immediately lose the C flag from the first column. So we're saying now that these records are not published in Central. What we get here is two flags to indicate that something's happened. The first one is just the general modified flag on the record, so we know something's changed on this record since the last time we synchronized. And the second one is the alert flag to say that this record has an alert set on it. And we can go into the record and look at what that alert's telling us. So if we open the record and we go to the alerts tab, we can see that we have an alert type of removed from Central, a date that it happened was the 25th of the 9th, the target is Central, and the alert message is this record is to be removed from Central. So what that's saying is that there's an open action on this record that's been started on the 25th of the 9th, but it hasn't yet been completed. So we've flagged this record to be removed from Central, but because we haven't synchronized with the server doesn't know it's got to be removed from Central, and because Wiley hasn't taken the monthly data dump, it won't actually be removed from the published version of Central until Wiley do that. If we want to publish a record in Central, we can just select the record we're interested in. We can go to the Central menu item and click Publish Highlighted Records in Central. And what this does is show us a summary of what we're going to do. So in this top listing here, we get the list of records that we've chosen to publish in Central. We only chose one, so there's only one appearing in this list. And in the bottom section here, we get the fields that'll be published in Central. Now what you see in this listing is the list of fields in the CRS format, not in the Central format. And I'll show you in another video how you can see the fields as they'll appear within Central. So if we want to publish this set of records, we can say publish. It'll ask us if we're sure, and we say yes. And what we get here is the C flag has reappeared, so that record would now be appearing in Central at the next publication run, provided we'd synchronized in time to get the data in there. So let's go back to the right-click menu and see what else we can do. Well, let's look at the My Register menu item. Within the CRS, you can have a global flag that affects all records and determines whether they're deemed to be in your register or not in your register. The records that you read in from your specialized register at startup will automatically be flagged as in my register, but you can also flag other records that you read in afterwards or that you that are extracted from reviews or protocols. You can flag those as being in your register. The easy way to do that is to right-click on the records, go to the My Register menu option and choose Add Highlighted Records. And what that will do, we only chose one, we can see that it's put a flag in the register column here. And what that's done is add this record to my register. If we want to, we can then go and filter by the records in your register so that you would only see those records that had that flag attached to them. And that's the easy way to weed out all of the additional records that were read in when we synchronize the Cochrane reviews and protocols, because those won't appear in your register unless you read them in from your register in the first place, or you've chosen afterwards to add them to your register. If you want to remove a record from your register, then it's simply a matter of choosing the My Register menu item and going to Remove Highlighted Records. And that removes that record from your register. It doesn't delete it from your CRS segment. All it does is remove it from your register. Okay, let's go and have a look at a few more options that we can use in the Actions menu. Again, we'll right-click on this record, and this time we might want to send this record to an author, because we know that this record should be included in a Cochrane review but isn't. So we click Send Highlighted Record to Author. We get a list of all the authors available within our data set. We can choose one of those, and we can see the reviews that that person is responsible for. In this case, the person's only responsible for one review, so we'll send the record, the reference to that person to be included in this review. We can add some comments if we want to. We'll go ahead and do that. And we click OK to mark that record to be sent to the author. When we do that, first of all, it tells us for a testing version no emails are actually sent, so we know that we can go ahead and do whatever we want to do without deluging everybody with emails. We'll just click past that. The first thing it tells us is, hang on a second, this reference that you're trying to send to the author isn't attached to a study, and it needs to be. So what it says is, here's a suggested name for this for a study that this reference will be attached to, and it's doing it by taking the surname and adding a year and possibly a suffix to it as well, depending on whether a study exists with that name already. We click OK, and that will create the study and flag that record as being sent to the author. We can go and look at what's happening and whether that's been picked up by the author in the tracking screen, and there's another video that looks at how we can do that. If we double click on the record and go and look at the linked records, we can now see that that record is linked to a study. It's not yet linked to a review because it hasn't been picked up by the author and included in the review. Let's go back to the pop-up menu. Let's pick a record that's not attached to a study. We know it's not attached to a study because there's no chain link flag in this column. If we right-click on the reference and we want to link it to a study, we can go straight to the Link Highlighted Records To tab, and that then gives us a list of all of the studies that we've currently got within our data set. So if we know that this reference needs to be linked, for example, to this study, we can just put a tick in the box, click Add Link, and that reference is immediately linked to the study. We know it's linked because it's got a link flag here. We could go in and look at the record and see that link, and we've got a flag here to say that this record's been modified since the last time we synchronized. So let's say that we find two records that we think really should be the same record, and we want to merge them. The way we do that is to choose both of the records with Control click and right click any of them and find within the pop-up menu Merge Highlighted Records. This pops up a screen which shows us both of the records and lets us choose which fields we want to appear in the merged record. On the left hand side is the first record that we chose, on the right hand side is the second record that we chose, and the fields are listed side by side. Where fields are in a different colour, it means that the values are different. Where fields are in the same colour, it means the values are the same. So what we see with this record is that there's a difference in the author, and it's just a difference of an initial. We see that the issue number is the same. We see that the pages are the same. We've got a slight variation in the journal title, and it looks like there's an and missing there and an and included there, and it looks like the rest of the fields are the same. So if we wanted to create a record that merged these values but chose the correct value to go into the new merged record, we could either say, okay, we're just going to take this first record and that will just take all of the values for that record. Or we can say we're going to take this record, in which case that'll take all of the values from this record. Or we can choose to pick the fields from both records and merge them together to get a composite record. So let's say we're going to take all of the values from this record. We know that the author's probably right, so we're going to take that. But also we know that the journal is probably right here, because that looks as though it's got an and missing. So we're just going to take that value from that field there. And the rest are all the same, so it doesn't matter which ones we take. So just in summary, before I click the button, what we've done, we've said we're going to take all of the fields from this record, and we know that because it's clicked up here. But we're also going to take this value from this record, and we know that because it's got a tick in it here. So if we go ahead and merge the records, it says this will delete the non-selected record from your database. Do you want to continue? The answer is yes. And that's gone ahead and merged those two records into a single new record. This is the record here, and we can go and see we've now got the correct journal name and we've got the author name that we chose to keep. Okay, so that's a quick tour of the right-click menu items and the action menu items that you get access to from the Browse tab and from the Search tab.